She is a presenter, podcaster, journalist, writer, and voiceover artist with a decade of experience in the radio industry in the UK and in India. Padam-bum.
I feel very privileged, madam. Thank you.
As you should be. May Mariam Thomas.
Thank you. Hello. Very excited.
Shall I call you MMT?
Yeah.
For this interview.
I'm not even
Does
kidding.
anyone call you MMT?
Like people used to call me empty. Like for a long time in school and stuff like that.
You are so far from
Mariam
empty,
used to be
though.
shortened to like Mari, and I was called Mari Biscuit in school for the longest time. So then everyone used to sing that song, right? Oh, so English, the real Mari, crispy, crunchy, ooh. So everyone used to sing that song to me, and I was like, what are those ads?
I can't believe we've not started recording properly and we've already gone off on a tangent. This should be a disclaimer for this episode. Guys, it's not going to be about the topic.
Yes, correct.
At all. So, while you are fabulous and have done many things, and I met you, I think, I met you a few years ago.
Yeah, man.
And what I love is that a part of in the introduction that my very talented producer has put together, it says, so Made in India provides an end-to-end solution to create an audio show from the moment a light bulb goes off and you say, hey, I want to make a podcast. And the funny thing is that is word for word what I said to you the first time we spoke. I was like, hey, I want to make a podcast.
Honestly, it's one of those true story, bro. Moments, and
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much where we started, and then we started to figure out what were the things that you wanted to do particularly, which is that this is why I thought like what we were going to do with the show was so interesting, because you wanted to do stuff in the sort of wellness and mental health space, but do it in a way that felt grounded and not frou-frou, which is what I really thought was interesting. And because you're just not that person either. You're not like, oh my god, my chakras or whatever. You're very much like, I'm losing my mind and I need to find a way to cope. So which was so much more realistic. I'm sorry, I know I'm not being like I'm not making you out to be like a weirdo, but like in the sense of that just seems so much it just felt so much more real to me. I'm just, there's so many of these kind of shows that are out there, and it just felt like this was one that the one that you wanted to do just felt more grounded and more real.
I just wanted it to be authentic, right? Because there's I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's tried a headstand and fallen over and almost cracked their skull open. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person. So I'm like, okay, great. I remember calling you and you were like, what? We need to talk about it on the podcast. I'm like, May, ask me if I'm okay first. Just like, that's going to make such a great episode.
It was so,
nice.
I mean, I was so worried because I was like, oh my God, are you okay? And then we were like, should we talk about this in the show? This is the stuff that we should be talking about in the show.
Season 2.
Yeah, season 2.
But anyway, coming back to why you're really here. So the title of this episode is Being Your Own Boss. And one of the things that I truly admire about you, and have gotten to know this side of you more and more over the last year now, since we started producing the podcast, is that you truly are your own boss. And you've managed to sort of set up this company and really be the boss lady and sort of do something in what was a relatively niche area up till a few years ago. And that is obviously in producing podcasts. And I think that would lead me directly into what I want to ask you first, is that because, keeping in the conversation with it being niche, because, some people come from families in business and they end up joining them. Some people leave their family business and work in the corporate space, and some people come from working class families and they end up setting up lucrative businesses of their own. Now, I want to know what your entrepreneurial journey was, and did you always want to have your own business, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I definitely never wanted to be a business owner.
Really?
Never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, that looks really hard. I don't want to do that. It was never something I wanted to do at all. It was not something that I was like, oh, I want to have my own. I was like, so okay, I'll get salary, I'll be very happy. And that or freelancing, which was my that provided me with, sort of more freedom in terms of, I mean, I may have been what I like to call the equilibrium of broke, which means that you're either broke because no work's coming in, or if you do get work, you're saving up for the next time you're going to be broke, so you're still broke. So like so freelancing, the one great luxury of that was that I had literally the luxury of time, right? Like I could organize myself in the way that I wanted to. And the entrepreneur thing kind of just landed on me. It kind of just like sort of happened, and then I'm like, oh, this is what I'm doing now. Okay, then. And I think I lived my life having done, I can't really say it's that corporate, but it kind of is. Like, I guess when you're working in a media company and you having been a VJ where you have some freedom, but you don't have a lot of freedom. You know, being an RJ is that, you know, you have some freedom, but not a lot because you're still answerable to bosses. And I always felt like I wanted to do something. Like I'd have these ideas, I'm like, let's do this and let's do that. And then I just felt quite creatively sort of stifled, which is why I left radio. And then it's not like I didn't love the medium. I still do. And I think a lot of people have asked me in the sense of like, would you go back? And I'm like, if they paid me enough, maybe. But the thing is with radio, it still is, it lacks like that level of freedom to be able to do what you want to do. I can't just do whatever show I want to. I have to do the show that they ask me to do, which is a thing that kind of bothered me. And then now when I got this chance to, initially I just wanted to keep Made in India, which was my own indie music show alive. That was the only mission that I had. And then when people started asking me to make their podcasts, like yourself, was when I was like, okay, cool, I'll make your podcast for you. And then that became a company, and that's how it sort of began, which is why like it kind of stumbled. Like the first person who sent me a WhatsApp message, like you said, no, I said I wanted to make a podcast. Pooja Dingra had messaged me saying, I want to make a podcast. Will you help me? Let's do this. I want you to do it for me. And then from that WhatsApp message, a company began. And so that's pretty much how my entrepreneur journey started.
This was very organic.
Yeah, very much like
Right.
felt like, but like, yeah, I had absolutely, I still don't. I mean, you know how you sometimes get those Instagram filters that come up, you know, where they ask you a question on the top of your head. And then, so I answered that question. And one of them was, where, you know, what are you looking forward to in your future? And my reply was retirement. I'm very excited about retirement. I feel like I've aged 20 years in the pandemic, and retirement looks
Or
very
bano
exciting.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
This comes at a price, buddy.
Yeah.
Speaking of comes at a price, how have you changed? Because you must have changed since when you were an employee to when you are your own boss. So what's changed
I think the thing
overall?
that changed definitely was just the responsibility of having people with you who you're answerable to as much as they're answerable to you. You also are answerable to them, that you have to make sure that you have enough money to pay salaries. You have to, like, you know, I never really had that responsibility before. And I think that, you know, really, and it really hit me not really when, you know, not till like during the pandemic, where suddenly you realize that you might not be able to pay the people who work for you. And that's when it, like, you know, so we got hit by the Yes Bank moratorium. We got hit by the pandemic. It was hard. And that was when it really hit me, the amount of responsibility it really is to, and also that I was very lucky that I had great people that were understanding, that really got what we were going through. Like I remember one of our employees who's not working with us anymore, but she was with us during the pandemic. She was kind of like our head of production and our senior producer. Her name is Sharanya. We had messaged her to say that, you know, we cannot pay full salary for the next few months and we're so sorry and all that kind of stuff. And we were just like sent her like this emo message. She sent us a message back saying, you guys don't worry. I've spoken to my parents. It's fine. We'll figure these things out. And like, I was like in tears. I just couldn't believe someone was that understanding and like, and so
that's really something.
it is. And it does take a lot, especially when you're a startup and you're literally doing everything. Like it's like even the most menial thing to the most mega thing.
Yeah.
And
you have to oversee everything as well.
yeah. But I think the two things is like the responsibility was something that I think was, I realized when I was, and the other is just having the ability to do whatever I wanted. I suddenly was like, I have this idea. Oh, I can just do it. I just have people who
That's
are like,
amazing. That's an
who
amazing
can make it
feeling, isn't
happen, right? Like I'm like, oh my God, I can come
that's
up
an
with an
amazing
idea.
feeling.
just make it happen,
I
because there are
don't- I
people who
know.
work with me who can make it
Yeah.
happen.
Who can make it happen. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So, speaking of what you're speaking about being your own boss, running the company, having all these responsibilities. However, are you a victim of hustle culture? And if you are, then how do you really maintain a balance between work life and personal life? Or do you have none?
I'm definitely a victim of hustle culture. I mean,
Really?
yeah, man. I mean,
But
it's
you seem so calm.
that's very
You don't
kind
seem
of
like
you.
you're like, you don't seem like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not like that, like as you've described, but I definitely am a victim of hustle culture where I've had to really learn how to like switch off. I've had to, in the sense of that my brain is active. It may not show on my face, but then it's all happening in my head, right? Of like, oh, is that thing done? And did that get done? And has this been finished? And whatever. And so, I think I'm a victim of that in the sense that I just feel like I'm working all the time, and you actually very purposefully have to find a way to switch that off, either in
Off.
your head or just physically around you. Like even the
How
most,
do you do it?
I mean, it takes a lot of like mental training, I think, of just going, I have to, like, for example, I was having the hustle culture thing of like, I'm a big fan of to-do lists, but then I would constantly feel like I would have this notebook with like a million things to do. And I would never dent that list. I would just go through it and then it just become the list to just keep going and keep going. And I never felt like I really accomplished anything. So I got this like whiteboard that was kind of given to me for something that I had done. And then on that whiteboard, I would just write the date, and because it's a whiteboard, it's never an unending list. You can only put what you're able to do today. So like that sounds super basic, but it just allowed me not to have this unending list of like never being able to, because I love, the absolute satisfaction of crossing something off your list.
Babe, you're talking to, again,
Preach to the
big
choir.
fan of to-do list. Preaching to the choir, hun. Big fan of to-do lists.
Yeah.
Very meticulous and very like in overdrive all the time. So I've also had to unlearn that behavior. I unlearned it with, I still have the same pen paper system, pen and notebook or whatever, pencil and notebook system. But I have just now started limiting consciously the number of tasks in a day.
Absolutely.
And not looking at it as a detriment to the task that's not been done, because there is always tomorrow. So that quote, which is don't do something tomorrow which you can do today, is completely unapplicable to me, because I will do something today that's meant to be done a month from now. That's literally like how well organized I can be when it comes to work. But I realized that it really took a toll on my mental health, especially.
It
And
makes
exactly like you were saying.
It makes you
I
feel
I
like
didn't
you've
know how
not
to switch
achieved
off.
anything, because you're just
Exactly. So then-
always not able to complete
Because I mean,
the
if you've got
list.
10 things to achieve in the day, if you set out 10 things, and if you achieve 8, which is a lot, and you still feel like you've not achieved everything, that's not a healthy way to be.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes the thing also with the to-do list is like when you put tasks down, you never actually know how long each one will take or how big each one is. So some might be like send a message to blah blah, right? And the other might be finish writing 5,000 word essay or whatever it is, right? So one obviously is bigger than the other. So if you finish like the small ones, but the big one never gets done, or you finish the big one, but it only ends up being one thing that's crossed off your list. Because sometimes you can have 3 that you've done out of 10, and that might be like the chunky tasks that you got. So even that also becomes. So I definitely agree with you that I'm very much a victim of hustle culture, and I've had to really program myself to not like. For example, I used to just work during meal times, like lunch, dinner. I'd just be like listening to something,
bad for you,
which is so bad. And so now I've stopped doing that, and I will allow myself, because like when I used to actually work in an office, we would go to the canteen and sit and chat and catch up and share lunch, and I can't do that because you're living and working from home. So now that half
From home,
hour,
exactly. Yeah.
what I do is that that half hour, right, is just like for me. And if I want to like read something or like an article that I was looking at or watch something or anything, like I just want to do something that has nothing to do with really work. And, I try to keep that at least that half hour. And then dinner, I'm not a night person. So I'm terrible. Like I have to switch off in the evening because my brain slowly stops working. I can do sort of menial tasks, but I can't do like sort of ideating and creative work in the night. So that's my struggle. I'm very much a morning person. But yeah.
Same.
It takes a lot.
It's very
to,
hard
like,
to come across
off.
morning people in this city.
Is it?
Like a lot of people are like, yeah, because I feel like a lot of people are like, what time do you want to have a meeting? They're like 11. I'm like, can we do it at 9, please?
Oh, I'd love meetings
Or 8. Oh, I love it. Can we have it over breakfast at 8?
That sounds good.
Which is very rare. But again, before we go off on a tangent about food, because I felt that coming.
It was. We were going to start recommending Matunga places for like good morning South Indian breakfast.
We're doing it already, May. Stop
It's
it.
true. Sorry.
So, you've spoken about how one of the most important leadership characteristics according to you, is to listen. And you don't believe that leaders know everything or should be expected to, and that it's okay to learn, to lean on people who have the expertise. Now, as a woman being an entrepreneur, you know the kind of undermining, doubting of abilities, etc., that women face. So how do you strike a balance between that and being open to support? Like, how do you... Because I've faced this, right? Where sometimes I feel undermined, but then I don't know if I should just... Am I being undermined, or is what they're saying really valuable to me?
Yeah.
So how do you sort of strike that balance?
I would say that I feel like a lot of the time people just undermine women a lot. I think there's so much around this, like, let me inform her, let me be helpful. So this is something that like I did and this was just out of sheer fun, but I did a Women's Day roast with a friend of mine to like literally roast Women's Day, because there are all these extremely, in quotes, token things that people do, suddenly, like, because like literally Women's Day, all the marketing budgets are kept aside for Women's Day, and everyone, like, so it becomes the lady payday, because like suddenly you are able to do all these things because like things come your way. And what about the rest of the year? Who knows? And this thing of like where people are being helpful, in quotes, right? Because they think that, they're giving you some very valuable advice and not just asking you for yours. And I've had it before where, when you are like, have some kind of expertise, I think it's important that not just that. For me, the important thing, as I mentioned earlier, was that listening to people, because I think that always helps. And I also feel like we also need to be listened to a little bit too. So to some extent, like, if someone's hired me to do something, they're hiring me because I'm good at what I do. They're not just hiring me to tell me what to do. I'm not some kind of like, where I'm just some kind of pawn for like them to execute something. It's important that I execute their vision, but I also have to do it in the way that's the best representation of them, and they have to trust me with that.
Do you feel that women are supportive of women?
I do think we're getting there. I feel like, and again, this is just maybe my own perspective on this.
I want to know your perspective. I want to know personally what your perspective is.
I do think that we all come from an age of the internet, and I think that to some extent that's allowed us to express ourselves and what we've gone through and how we feel. But it's all also quite isolating. We're not physically actually together. Like, we have to organize marches and stuff to actually meet each other. And I think that the women supporting women is happening, but because it's a lot of it seems online, I feel like that actual coming together is actually much more and a bigger effort. And I do think now that women are rallying around each other in some way and shape or form. But I think that we still have quite a long way to go. I think some of it ends up being a lot more subtle, It's just, the support isn't just that, we're all together and we're on a march. Sometimes it's like something that you help someone with in a meeting, like you like, I didn't hear.
I've called you up remember I called you up when I had that situation on set, and I was like, because I don't know why, I just thought that, and you're not even from the industry in that kind of industry, right? But I was just like, I feel like May would know what to do in these kind of situations, and I just reached out, right? And you offered me some information which was very practical, and in a way was very helpful because you're not in that space. So you were very much giving me a third person's perspective of how to handle it, and it was so helpful. It was so helpful.
I'm so glad. I feel like I've come from this place, because besides yourself, I've had like a lot of other women who've been in very awkward situations, like been asked to be part of an event where the in quotes guy who's organizing it might not be such a great guy, and it's awkward, but at the same time it's a potential income stream, and how do you figure that stuff out? It's complicated, right? It's like we're in situations where I think for a lot of women your income source comes from certain spaces that might not be supportive of women or have taken advantage of women in some way, and so it's hard, and I think all of us have to find that person that we can talk to go, I don't know what to do, because it's hard when you just don't know. I have to work with this person and I am not comfortable because I heard these stories about them and I know someone who's working with them. It's hard.
I think as a general rule, the best thing to do is to always reach out for help, like it's man or woman. It's just, you never know, right? Who might be able to give you that one little sliver of information which might change how you look at the perspective. But thank you for your perspective on whether you think women support women or not. I actually agree with you. I think it's changing. I think it used to be a lot more vicious and competitive when I first came into the industry. But I find that it is changing now into a more supportive space. Something that I feel we don't talk enough about is actually having to make difficult decisions and the ability to say no, even when it's really advantageous, like you were talking about, really lucrative situation, because we may be compromising on our values. So have you ever been in a situation like this, and how do you handle it?
So definitely making difficult decisions, all, like, not just all the time, but I think in certain circumstances. Like, I'll give you an example. I will not name names here, but
You can tell me later on WhatsApp.
Yeah, I had a situation where a makeup brand that I hadn't heard of had contacted me because they wanted to make a podcast. And so, we all online, of course, like we were talking to the founder and we'd spoken to, and I got this through a PR agency who basically said that we handle this particular client and they want to make a podcast and you seem like the experts in this space, blah. So then we had like a back and forth, spoke to them. And then before our next meeting, I was going to put a concept together for as a proposal for a show that we were going to make for them. And then I started to do my research, and then there was like one entire section within their website, one that was only for like whitening and brightening, like sort of whatever it is. And I'm like, I can't do this. And we can't, like, I'm also someone, I can't fight all battles. Like, I can't fight environmentalism and like caste politics, and like I can't fight every battle. I'll support as much as I can to the extent that I can. The one thing that I just cannot stand of being a woman of color and being a South Indian woman and like having, walked into a beauty parlor and they're like, madam, you should bleach your face. And I'm like, I can't believe they suggest to do these things. It's ridiculous. And so they still do. And it's because of these like ideas of beauty. And that's the thing that I'm like, this is the battle I will always fight. So we all have to pick our battles, because also we don't have as much sort of mental energy to be able to fight all battles, right?
Of course. I think this is one of the fundamental things that's in that book, which is what is it called? The Rules of War?
I don't know.
It's a business book.
Okay.
But basically, this is a classic example of what you're just saying, word for word, which is you pick your battles.
Yeah.
Um,
And even for
and-
this, the example that I was giving you, what happened was that I basically decided to not do the work. So I had to notify. So because it came through a PR agency, I also was probably going to lose other opportunities that this PR agency had handled other clients or brands that they might want to do work with me on. So I was going to also lose that. It wasn't just one brand. It was a company that was working with many different brands. But then I also had to be in a space where I can't compromise. I haven't started my own company to do the work that doesn't make me happy or bring me any joy, or, you know, I always think of it as if I'm able to promote the show, then I'm happy, right? If I'm going to be like, I'm going to tweet about this show, I'm going to write a Instagram story about this show to say, hey, you should totally go listen to the Sarah Jane show because this is why it's so good. I should be able to feel proud of every show that I make, that I want to promote it. This was not going to be one of them. Because I felt I don't ever not promote something because I'm ashamed of what I've done or like who they are. So that's when I actually had to, and then I had to compose an email. So I composed that email to send to PR auntie. And then, I mean, the crazy thing was I was in this space where I was feeling like I was apologizing for like, I'm so sorry, but I don't want to do this, you know? But then I was like, I had to rework it to be like, hey, this is the reasons why I saw this and I don't feel comfortable doing this, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry for, thank you for thinking of me in this opportunity. I still do want to work with you, blah, 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 but I just can't work with this particular company and make their podcast. Because again, with a podcast, it becomes their own voice, right? Like I'm basically creating a representation of a voice for them, that's going to be their mouthpiece. And I'm like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, of course.
And and then that PR woman, and who, by the way, was very lovely about the whole thing. She was kind of like, oh my God, I completely understand. I'm so sorry. They had no idea. They were like, we didn't know. And because this was round about the time that like Fair and Lovely became Glow and Lovely, it was literally exactly at that time. It was like within a month of that happening that this came my way. And then I think because of that fire that had started, they were like, maybe we need to look into this because they are the PR agency. So I was a little bit like, oh no.
No, it's astonishing to me. Like, again, like I've discussed this before on another episode. I was talking with Ali Fazal and we were talking about responsible endorsement. And the thing is that as a celebrity and as an actor, there's only so much that you can inform yourself, right? Like sometimes you find out things about the brand after the endorsements come out and they've just not, and the thing is the brand's not been very clear with you.
Yeah.
But so again, you fight your battles, you do what you can to inform, you give disclaimers. And then the battles that you do feel strongly about, like I've had the word for word exact same experience as you've had, which is when I won the Miss India, there was a company, a beauty brand that called me to endorse it, and it was a very done thing. If you won the Miss India, you endorsed this brand. And they called me the first year and offered me a suitably large amount of money to do the endorsement because it was a year contract.
Yeah.
And at the end of this conversation, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable endorsing it. And they were just guffawed. They were like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, it's just, I don't believe in what you stand for. Like, I'm sure the product is great and, whatever. But I just don't believe in what you stand for. And the thing is, they called me every year for about 4 years following that after I had won.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because maybe the manager changed for the brand or whatever.
Oh,
so they
okay,
kept
okay,
calling, right, every year. And I kept saying no every year. And then I think in the 5th year or something like that, they finally stopped calling. But it's just, the thing is that I don't know if I can do that all the time and with every brand.
Oh God, no. Yeah.
But this was very blatantly in your face branding of if you're not white, you're not going to get a job. If you're not white, you're not going to get married. If you're not white, you are not beautiful.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't endorse that. Also because I'm tanned and, I'm far from fair skinned. So it just, I couldn't do it. But
I hear you, man.
anyway, moving on from that, we need to talk a very important M word. And it's not me, Miriam Thomas.
Well, thanks.
It's money.
Money.
So financial stability is clearly very important for you. It's very important for me too. You said that creating your Amma's retirement fund is one of your dreams, which is equal parts endearing and inspiring, honestly. And women have always been conditioned to believe that they're bad with numbers, which also keeps many of them from taking finances in their own hands. But I want you to tell me about your relationship with finances and how do you, what are the few things that you do to keep a tab on what's going on with your money?
So, I mean, one thing is, and again, this was very different when I was younger and freelancing and doing my own thing. When you're running your own company, not that I can't handle my own money, but you definitely need an accountant, like a good, trustworthy, like I'm not doing my own taxes. Someone can do my taxes for me. But the thing that's important for me is to be financially aware of what's going on. Like, where is the money coming in and where is it going out and what are we spending on? And, this year, how much did we make and what are we going to put that money into? And creating like a corpus fund so that like maybe if we want to do other things in terms of sort of marketing experiments or whatever, that like it is really important, right? Like for me. And a lot of that, I, again, don't want to be a giant cliche and say that I don't know numbers. I understand, of course. And I'm always in this space that I'm never going to be someone who knows everything. But I am willing to like listen. I might ask lots of silly questions, but as long as you answer them and I understand what's going on, then I'm good. And so that's kind of where I come from. I'm like, just because something seems a little scary doesn't mean that you can't ask questions and understand it better. So even when it comes to money and finances, like I'm not even kidding. I had a very dear friend of mine who was very much like, you need to get medical insurance and you need to get this and you need to do that. And he's such a dear friend of mine. Like a lot of the time, I think it's important for entrepreneurs because you sometimes can be very isolated, is that to have people around you who can give you advice, like someone you can just call and be like, I'm not sure if I should take this decision or should I work with this person if they're asking me to do A, B, C, and D. And he's been that person for me. And he actually was very sweet. Like at the end of 2020, he did like a little presentation where he took me through like how I could plan my finances. And he's like, okay, you fill this Excel sheet out, you do this. And if this is what you're going to spend every month on, say your medical insurance, life insurance, blah, 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 this will be for your retirement fund. This will happen here and this will happen there. And, help me sort of like figure that stuff out. Because again, I don't know how to do that myself, but it's nice to have someone in your life who can help you with your finances. And that's the whole thing. Just because you're not good at money or understanding how to save and calculate a lot of this stuff, that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who can help you do it, which is what's important. So I'm not saying you have to hand everything to someone, but then find someone who can help you and who you trust.
And even if you do hand it, just ask all the questions you want to ask as many times as you need to ask until you understand what's going on with your money. Absolutely. Make notes, keep a diary. I don't know. There are so many ways, honestly speaking. Yeah. It's how I learned whatever I've learned, which is not vast.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm not some finance guru at all. Me neither. But I know, like what you said, I know where the money is. I know what it's being invested in.
Absolutely.
I know more or less what kind of returns are coming in per year. And I know how much more, very importantly, how much more I'd like to grow, like where I'd like to be.
Oh gosh, yeah. Because you also
that's very important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Because then you also are seeing your own personal growth and opportunity come your way. Like and this is a very recent decision that I've made because of a lot of the opportunities that I'm getting and then wanting to be able to take them on, but I don't really have anyone to help me negotiate those conversations. And you're definitely a talent that understands it. I'm currently in the process of kind of getting management. So like that's something that I'm doing that I'm really excited about because when opportunities come your way, but then having to negotiate everything yourself takes a lot, and it's so much energy that, you're not able to truly be creative, right? Being your own manager. So I think that's also something that I think
for me, you said one of the best things that a leader should do is learn how to listen. I think for me, one of the best things a leader should learn how to do is to learn how to delegate.
Oh my God. Delegation.
Delegation is an art. Because delegation involves not being attached. So you kind of you're close enough to observe what's going on, but far enough to not be affected by it not being done
Yeah.
as per your specific ways.
Yeah.
So the art of delegation is really something which I think can really help a company grow and an entrepreneur grow, especially as
I
your
would
team is
also
growing.
say that, like, to be able to delegate in a way that makes you feel like I think everything is going to be done is that you have to invest a little extra time for training, for someone to understand what exactly you want. Because, like, that's one of the other
Absolutely.
things. Like, people just think, okay, she's joined the company. Now I'm going to give her some work to do and get her to do it. And
No,
then
no,
she
no, no,
comes
no.
back, and then you're like, this is not what I asked
Not
for.
what I asked for. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
so
yeah.
important that you might have to invest that little extra in the beginning just to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that they're doing it the way that you want it to be done. And then
Yeah.
after that, it's like, the whole point is that they end up being able to do it even better than you. And so then when
Yeah.
you're looking at the work, you're like, I have nothing to say. This is excellent. Let's move on. Next. But like, yeah, delegation is a skill in itself to be able to.
It is a skill in itself, yeah. I think it's a very important skill that an entrepreneur should have, especially with if you have a growing startup. Right. We are at our final question. And that question is basically, it's very simple. In keeping with all things entrepreneurial and productivity related, what are the 3 tips that you could share to any young entrepreneur or professional just to sort of help keep them on
So
track
the
to
3
achieve their
things
goals?
off the top of my head that I can think of is if you have an idea and you really believe in it, whatever that idea may be, and I'm saying this because I've had so many situations where I've had this great idea and no one wants to do it. And so then you end up not doing it because you either don't have a chance to, or you don't have whatever it is that can help you do it. And when people don't believe in your idea, you kind of like throw it away. But I always am in this space that if you really believe in something, then maybe you have to just round up, the favors and the money and the favors and the money and the people to help you out and try to make it happen. Because you'll always feel like you didn't really do that one thing because everyone else didn't believe in it, because maybe they just didn't see your vision the way you saw it. So I'm always like, go ahead and do the thing that you wanted to do, regardless of whether people tell you that, like, I don't really think this is good, or I don't.
Okay, so go ahead and do the thing that you want to do. What's next?
The other was that surround yourself with people that you trust, which is very hard. But the whole importance of that is that you can't be, and I always stress this, that you can't be the person that knows everything, which is why, like, I run a podcast production company and I'm not an audio engineer. It just, yeah. So, I mean, I don't have.
Great example.
Yeah, so I don't have all the expertise in the world, but I'm very lucky that I work with people whose opinion that I trust, and then who also whose ideas that I like to listen to and I'm curious about. Like, if I have something that's like, I don't know what to do for this thing, and then I talk to my team and I'm like, hey, do you have an idea of how we could do this? And then they'll have like some 3-4 ideas. And I'm like, okay, this sounds great. So you're never alone. But do surround yourself with people that you feel like whose opinion you really trust. Because that's so important,
yeah.
because you can't assume that you have, just because you're the leader, to do everything yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And finally, final tip?
Final tip, I guess trust your gut. I think that's like super basic, but it's only because I think we've grown up with so much of the things around us telling us, don't do this and don't do that and don't, laugh so loud and don't be like this. And, people won't, if you do that, like, people will think you're like this. And a lot of the time, because we're surrounded by people constantly telling us what we shouldn't do, we've lost the ability to figure out what are the things that we want to do. So I feel like when you're always told what you're not supposed to do, you suppress your sort of gut instinct a little bit, which is why, like, we lose the ability to sort of trust our own gut, like when it's telling us that I don't think you should do this, it's not going to make you feel good, or go for it, do that, you're going to be so happy when you do that. So I think that we're always told, like, all of this, that, like, having to go back to trusting your gut again takes a lot. So I would say, with that in mind, try to, like, figure out what your
Listen to
sort
your
of,
gut a little bit.
yeah, and your own instincts about certain things. And if you just get like, I hate to use a juju word, but if you're feeling them bad vibes, don't do it.
We've made it through this entire conversation without you saying the word synergy.
I know, our wonderful entrepreneur, like,
For everybody listening,
I know,
me
but you
hates the
did
word
get me
synergy.
to do some key takeaways.
I did make Everyone's going to be very thankful to us. Listen, buddy, thank you for this conversation.
Oh, thank you.